America's promise is an extremely dangerous game for Ukraine. Indian people struggle with scorching heat of nearly 50 degrees Celsius. Chilean firefighters arrested on suspicion of arson that killed hundreds of people. Global average life expectancy has decreased because of COVID-19. America's promise is an extremely dangerous game for Ukraine. The U.S. continues to promise that Ukraine will become a member of NATO someday without giving any specific timeline. Such promises are expected to bring out the worst because they will provoke Russia, a country that views Ukraine's accession to NATO as a red line. On April 4th, speaking at the NATO summit, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaffirmed that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our aim at this summit is to help build bridges to that membership. This is an extremely dangerous statement, commented Eurasia View. This latest statement continues the trend of making promises to Ukraine that it could one day become a NATO member, without providing a specific timeline. Here's the worst that could happen. Such promises would provoke Russia, which has repeatedly declared that Ukraine's possible NATO membership is a red line for it. At the NATO conference in Bucharest in 2008, President George W. Bush made the mistake of arguing for Georgia and Ukraine to be allowed to join NATO. France, Germany, and other NATO allies hesitated, and the conference ended with a declaration that Ukraine and Georgia would one day become NATO members, but without providing a clear roadmap. Russia reaffirmed its opposition to the NATO membership of its closest neighbors, and 4 months later, a 5-day war between Russia and Georgia broke out, causing heavy damage to both warring sides. 6 years later, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, and in 2022, it launched a special military operation into Ukraine. The war continues to this day in a bloody stalemate, although Russia is gaining momentum. This year, there is no mention of Ukraine's spring or summer offensive after their disastrous performance last year. Ukraine's prospects for success have evaporated. In July 2023, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby declared, "Of course, the Ukraine are at war right now. Therefore, Ukraine's ability to become a NATO member in the near future is unlikely," but Mr. Kirby's statement suggests that if Ukraine is not at war with Russia, it could become a member of NATO. This is also an extremely dangerous idea, according to Eurasia View. If Russia believes that immediately after the current conflict ends, Ukraine will be granted NATO membership, then peace will be difficult to establish. Although most in the West deny it, Russia has security concerns about Ukraine, and Ukraine's NATO membership would only exacerbate those concerns. Just as the United States would not have accepted Canada or Mexico becoming members of the Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, because this would have meant that Soviet soldiers and military equipment would have been right across the American border. Similarly, a Ukraine that is a member of NATO is more likely to behave in a way that provokes Russia, according to Eurasia View. Russia may not be strong enough to threaten NATO, but it is strong enough to eventually defeat Ukraine. NATO's current support for Ukraine means that the war between Ukraine and Russia is in fact a proxy war between Russia and NATO, with Ukraine providing military medicine and NATO, mainly the U.S., providing weapons. In fact, according to Eurasia View, Ukraine should not be welcomed into NATO because it brings nothing but security responsibilities to the alliance. Ukraine's NATO membership would not enhance the security of the United States or any other current NATO member, but would only exacerbate Russia's security concerns and increase the likelihood of war in the future between NATO and Russia. Therefore, in fact, the United States should clearly state that Ukraine will never be granted NATO membership. As for Ukraine, to end the war, it needs to find a path to a ceasefire with Russia and reach a peaceful solution, including some territorial concessions and a commitment that it will not join NATO in the near future. This outcome would be less than ideal from Ukraine's perspective, but despite Kiev's massive resistance and Western assistance, victory on the battlefield remains unlikely. Indian people struggle with scorching heat of nearly 50 degrees Celsius. Northern regions of India continue to reel under a prolonged, intense heat wave that has turned people's lives upside down. On May 23rd, the temperature soared above 45 degrees Celsius in many states and reached 48.8 degrees Celsius in Barmer city of Rajasthan state. Some areas in India are facing water and electricity shortages due to a spike in consumption. On May 22nd, New Delhi's peak electricity demand reached 8,000 megawatts, the highest in the history of the Indian capital. New Delhi is experiencing a scorching heatwave, with temperatures hovering around 45 to 46 degrees Celsius this week. Weather experts said the heat index, which is the temperature the human body feels when relative humidity combines with air temperature, has exceeded 50 degrees Celsius due to high humidity. Hospitals in the city have set up special facilities to treat patients suffering from heat-related illnesses, which are on the rise. Mr. Rohit Nair, 34 years old, working in advertising in New Delhi, shared that he could not stand the sweltering heat. "I feel exhausted all day. New Delhi is boiling this year," he said. Nair avoids going out in the afternoon, but staying indoors is not very comfortable either. "It's impossible to sit in the house without turning on the air conditioner," Nair said. BBC and PTI News quoted information from the Indian Meteorological Department IMD saying that temperatures in many states in the north of the country soared above 45 degrees Celsius and reached 48.8 degrees Celsius in Barmer city, state, Rajasthan. At least 12 people in the state of Rajasthan have died due to suspected heat stroke. The IMD has issued a red alert for Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, Delhi and Uttar Pradesh. Scorching heat is expected to last until the middle of next week. Some places are suffering from water and electricity shortages due to a sudden increase in electricity consumption. Chilean firefighters arrested on suspicion of arson that left hundreds dead. Chilean police have arrested a firefighter on suspicion of causing a fire that killed 137 people in the city of Vina del Mar, according to Al Jazeera. On May 24th, Chilean police issued an arrest warrant for a 22-year-old firefighter, suspected of causing a fire that killed 137 people in the resort city, Vina del Mar, in February this year. The prosecutor's report said that the suspect volunteered to join the fire department a year ago. At this person's house, the authorities found items used to create a fire. The suspect's motive for the crime is still unknown. "We have clearly identified the location where the fire broke out and the tools used to cause the fire. We also believe that there was another person involved in the fire who instructed the 22-year-old suspect to commit the crime," Evil said Mr. Ivan Navarro, head of the Environmental Crime Investigation Agency. Meanwhile, Vina del Mar Mayor Macarena Ripamonti emphasized that the fire was a deliberate act. "We were all sure about that," Ms. Ripamonti said. The process of extinguishing the fire was extremely difficult because firefighting vehicles were stuck on roads blocked by many burned cars. The fire killed 137 people and became the world's second deadliest fire of the 21st century. Global average life expectancy has decreased because of COVID-19. The World Health Organization, who recorded that after the outbreak of COVID-19, the average life expectancy of people globally decreased by 1.8 years to 71.4 years. The report was announced by WHO on May 24th at a meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. According to WHO, in less than 3 years, the pandemic has wiped out nearly a decade of progress in improving life expectancy. The number of years of healthy living for people around the world also decreased by 1.5 years to 61.9 years. This WHO statistic highlights impacts that are unevenly felt around the world. The Americas and Southeast Asia regions are most severely affected. Life expectancy in this region decreased by about 3 years Healthy life expectancy decreased by 2.5 years between 2019 and 2021. The Western Pacific region was minimally affected in the first 2 years of the pandemic, with the reduction in life expectancy was less than 0.1 year and healthy life expectancy was reduced by 0.2 years. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of WHO, assessed, "The world continues to make progress in health, with better access to medical services in the face of emergency situations." However, he said the pandemic showed how fragile those advances were because COVID-19 erased a decade of gains in longevity. This is why the new pandemic agreement is so important. According to the agreement, it is necessary to strengthen global health security, sustain long-term investments in health, and promote equity within and between countries.